So, good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome to another Backyard Naturalist presented by the Urban Ecology Center. My name is Tim, and I will be your host for this holiday-themed episode. The holiday in question this time is the Christian holiday of Christmas, and a popular song for those who celebrate Christmas is the 12 Days of Christmas, and the opening verse mentions a partridge. In fact, the partridge makes it into all of the verses since all 12 verses end with a partridge in a pear tree. We often feature birds on the Backyard Naturalist, so we thought it would be fun to look into the stories of the partridge. So I hope you're comfortable, maybe with a nice warm beverage by the glow of your device as we begin episode 16 of season 6 of the Backyard Naturalist, Partridges of Madison County. If you're watching this and you are a subscriber, thank you. You keep this journey of learning alive. Your support allows us to present this weekly program for free, and it allows us to continue well into our sixth season. I know many of you are not subscribers and are strong supporters of the Urban Ecology Center, but no matter what brings you here or how you got here, whether you're live with us on Friday or watching this recorded or whatever your story is, I'm glad you're here. And I encourage you to look at a subscription if you haven't already. There is still some time to sign up for our new field trip series, which is called Green Spaces with Familiar Faces. So in 2025, we're going to bring you 11 monthly-ish field trips with local personalities. So people like State Representative Darren Madison. We have the Milwaukee leader of the BIPOC Birding Club, Rita Flores-Wiskowski. We have local author Eddie Daniel. Many other folks are going to take us to see their local favorite green spaces and tell us why it's their local favorite green space. So if you are a super subscriber, you are already signed up for these trips. If you are a regular subscriber, you can upgrade your subscription to get a major discount on the field trips. If you're not a subscriber, you can still get a great discount for the series, the field trips. And you can also sign up for the trips individually. You just get a little nice discount if you sign up for the whole season. So for more information on any of this, please visit our website, theurbanecologycenter.org, or talk to anyone, particularly in the research team at the center. Another program I'm super excited to bring you is a 4-week-long winter ecology course, which starts in February in the newly renovated Washington Park branch of the Urban Ecology Center. We're going to start each class up in the very cozy new library on the second floor with great views of the lagoon and of the atrium. And we'll be surrounded by books from the collection of Noel J. Cutright. So each class is going to have an indoor portion for about 45 minutes or so, and then an outdoor lab as we look at how plants and animals and other forms of life, including partridges, are able to cope with and thrive in the winters of the north. If you just want to take the classroom portion, you can leave at the intermission if you don't want to go outside, but I encourage you. Washington Park at night is a beautiful place, especially in the winter time, very peaceful. So registration is open on the Urban Ecology Center website, and if you have any questions, you can contact myself. Next week on the Backyard Naturalist, we will basically just let this virtual fireplace go, and we're going to be sharing stories. It's going to be kind of an open mic, an open naturalist mic, and our goal is really to share whatever we want to share with each other in this community. I know a lot of us have been together for a long time. Some of us have been together for a few weeks, maybe your first time, but I love, one of my favorite parts of being here every Friday morning at 9 a.m. is hearing from you all and your wonderful stories. And so if you have a story or a wish for the new year or a highlight from the last year, if you have some photos you want to share, poems, stories, anything, bring something or just bring yourself. And we'll just see where the conversation takes us for an hour. Yeah, it's a tradition that I really enjoy. Okay, and we are here today to talk about the partridge, which makes an appearance on the first day of Christmas. I'm not even sure I know what that is, in a pear tree. So there's a few layers to unpeel here, starting with what is a partridge. So for those of us in North America or any of the Americas, any part of the New World, you would not see a partridge per se, a bird that is called a partridge that is native We don't have any native partridges. It's more nuanced than that, and we'll see as we go. But unless it was a pet or it escaped from a zoo or it was introduced here, partridges are not native to this part of the world. But we'll take a step back even further. So phylogenetically, the partridge, from a genetic standpoint, it is a eukaryotic vertebrate animal, a bird, and a bird that is in the order Galliformes. And we we visited this group of birds in a previous Backyard Naturalist. If you go back to the second season, we had a Thanksgiving episode on the turkey hollow. Turkeys and partridges belong to the same order, in fact, the same family, as do some of the other familiar birds like the chicken and the peafowl, grouse. So when you think partridge, these are the chicken-like birds, the ground birds that they're related to. Very important to humans all around the world, different cultures, a lot of times for meat and eggs, sometimes spiritually, important to the ecosystems as seed dispersers and predator prey. They tend to be great at running and poor at flying. Although every once in a while you'll see a turkey way up high in a tree and you think, how did it get up there? They can fly, but they tend to run as it's their go-to. As a group, they tend to have amazing colors for courtship. And sometimes it's not just the colors, it's how they display those colors. And the word gallus is Latin for rooster. And when you think of the word fowl, Fowl, and you're not talking about waterfowl, this is the group that we identify as fowl, as land fowl. So most of these birds are in the same order. Most of them continue on to the same family, the Phaeacidae. Kind of think of them as pheasants. So we get into a little bit more about what the pheasants are in that turkey episode. So I won't go too much more into that now. But it's interesting that when you think of partridges in particular, but also some of these other group pheasants, grouse, quail, we humans love to group things. It's important to us to group things, particular in nature. It helps us kind of navigate a very chaotic world. And particularly these birds are grouped not as much as how they're related to each other, like by genus, which is often the case in a lot of other birds. We just kind of gave a bunch of similar looking birds names. They're all in the same family, so there's some relation to each other. But within this family, it's kind of a mess. It's not an easy, like, this is a group that's related to each other and they're called this. We pretty much call birds partridges that are in a lot of different groups. So there's not really like a partridge line of the pheasants, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So one of my goals is I do want to know what the partridge is in the pear tree. There's a lot of suspects. It's fuzzy, it's gray, it's muddy. But again, it's not something from the New World because all of the partridges are native to the Old World, with the exception of some that have been introduced recently to the Americas, mainly for hunting. Partridges are the only group of fowl. Well, so you could say the same thing that I'm saying about partridges as you can for pheasants and quail. Again, it's the common name that we give to these birds. It's the colloquial name. And for a lot of these fowl that are important to us, it's more size that we give to them, or that we rank them by size more than anything. So within these fowl, the bigger birds we tend to call pheasants. If they're kind of the smaller birds, we call them quail. And if they're kind of in between, we call them partridges. So that's really how these birds are grouped, not by genetics, not by lineages. They're all very similar groups of birds, but we mainly group them by size. So the most closely related bird to a partridge might actually be called a quail. In fact, a lot of these words are kind of interchangeable, but the pheasants are the papa bear, the quail are the baby bear and the partridges are the mama bear, kind of like the too big, too small, just right, whatever. Um, in general, and in addition to being medium sized, partridges for the most part are pl fairly plain in color. There's some exceptions to the rule. Uh, by gray to brown, good omnivore diet, eating a mix of seeds and insects, and which is true of most birds actually. Like other fowl, they are popular as game birds, often reared in captivity and then released for the purpose of hunting, which is how a lot of species made it across the pond to the Americas. Um, let's go, sorry. The first written records of partridges in human culture lie in Greek mythology. Again, the partridges have been part of many other. I'm just going to do one thing really quick here. Um, we only have record of, certain written. If the cultures have written down some things, we have greater representation in our global history by cultures that have things that were written or weren't destroyed and that we understand. And one of the, that's the beauty of history is we're relearning history based on the cultures, the stories that haven't been told and haven't been dominant. But the first kind of documented records of partridges are in Greek mythology, in particular Daedalus threw his apprentice Talos off. Sometimes it's a hill, sometimes it's a building in a fit of jealous rage, but Athena saves his life by turning him into a partridge. So, which the story goes, it's just why partridges to this day don't like to build nests high up in trees, particularly pear trees, nor do they like to fly very high because they are mindful of this falling, this tragedy in their own past. And that's kind of the first, again, documented representation of partridges. In the Middle Ages, medical practitioners would recommend the partridge as an aphrodisiac, suggesting that the partridge was superior in arousing dulled passions, increasing the powers of engendering, gentle to the human stomach. They stimulated bodily fluids, raised the spirits, and firmed the muscle. These are the words of Madeline Pellner Kuhlman, who's a medieval scholar. And so often partridges are represented in art and culture as symbols of fertility. The partridge has also been used as a symbol for Kurdish nationalism to distinguish from non-Kurdish Iraqis that regard the falcon as their national symbol. But for people who grew up in the Western world as a Christian, probably the most famous reference to the partridge is the Christmas Carol, the 12 Days of Christmas. So partridges are ground nesting birds, so that's already an ecological red flag that they probably wouldn't be seen in pear trees. Some suggest that the word pear tree is a corruption of the French word for partridge, which is perdrix, and it's possible that somewhere along the line, perdrix was heard as pear tree, or that the line had both the English followed by the French, so a partridge, un perdrix, could be heard as a partridge in a pear tree. There are a lot of competing theories as to what the song represents. To some, the symbol of the partridge and the pear tree represent Jesus Christ at a time when Catholics were persecuted in Protestant areas, and so the song was kind of a code. To others, the suggestion is that this is the origin of the song was a children's memory game. So I know in road trips with the Vargos, we played a game like I'm going camping. The first person would start off, I'm going camping and I'm bringing a tent. And then the next person would say, I'm going on a camping trip and I'm bringing a tent and a pair of boots, a pair of pink boots. And then the third person would say, I'm going on a camping trip, bringing a tent, pair of pink boots, and something else. So it was like a memory game, and the longer it got, the harder it was to memorize it. Kind of like a verbal game of the game of the toy Simon, and it's common. So I think that's a very plausible origin story for the 12th day of Christmas, which does that repeating pattern. Others say that it's the ultimate love song. So it's a gift from a lover to their love interest because the song is rife with references to fertility, maids a milking, lords a leaping, geese a laying. The dancers and pipers and drummers might imply that there's a wedding or gifts that would be useful at a wedding. The pear is heart-shaped, and then we already know that the partridge is considered an aphrodisiac. So could have a religious beginning, could be a children's game, could be a folk song, could be a love story, could be all of those, could be neither, could be that each does have some representation. Um, but it has been sung about and by those who listen to holiday music. And it probably started even as a more as a poem or a story than a song or this game. And so it was very likely put to music in many different arrangements. And then one of them that was written in 1909 is the most familiar arrangement that stays with us to today. So before that 1909 kind of took over as the dominant cultural version of the song, there were probably many different versions, many different songs, many different stories. But as a naturalist, all of this history is fine, but I wanted to know there's a lot of birds that we consider partridge. Is there a specific species of partridge that is referred to in this song? So there's 46 different species of birds that we call partridge or consider to be partridges that span across 15 genera. And there's a few examples here, the mountain bamboo partridge, the chestnut necklaced partridge, the snow partridge, the chukar partridge. So of these 46 birds that we call partridges, which one is most likely referenced in the song? Not super clear, but we'll take a look at a few candidates. A very likely candidate would be the chukar, also called the chukar partridge. I don't even know if I'm saying chukar right. It's kind of the quintessential partridge. When you look at artistic representations of the song, this is often the bird you see. From an ecological standpoint, this is a bird that's found in open, grassy areas. They fly fast and low. They run more often, like other partridges. Very popular as a game bird throughout Eurasia. And because of that, introduced to many other areas of the world as the Eurasian humans spread, they often brought this particular partridge with them. So there's a strong naturalized population of these in the western US, where they eat mostly cheatgrass, which is an invasive weed. So you have an invasive non-native bird eating an invasive non-native weed. Will you find it in a pear tree? Very likely not. They will jump on large rocks, but rarely, if at all, would you ever see them in a tree. So if this is the song, Partridge, it would be a partridge on a large rock, not a pear tree. So likely, it's a strong candidate. We'll look at some others. Here's the gray partridge. The most common partridge of Europe, where the song and the story likely originated. Very popular for raising as a game bird, very popular in hunting. Also introduced worldwide for hunting as this group of humans spread. This is this is the only true partridge that we will see here in Wisconsin. Again, there's a muddied relationship between all these birds, grouse, partridge, pheasants, things like that. But this is the only true partridge you would see bird watching in Wisconsin. And not native here, but have been here so long, they're naturalized and have become a regular part of the bird community and the hunting community. So if you are a birder, it's rare to get a good look at a gray partridge, because usually what happens, and usually happens with a lot of these birds, is that they scare you rather than you finding them, because their method of defense is to stay put, and to stay hidden, to stay camouflaged. That is like their first method of defense. But if they're on the side of the road in a tree and you're walking close to them, they'll wait and wait and wait. But if you get too close, then their next defense is to scare the poop out of you. They burst into the air and then fly away. So you or a predator or something is most likely going to be what that, and then that gives them time to kind of fly away. Fairly common, but again, hard to find, and not likely to be found in or even near trees. So they gain points, I think, in probably being the most familiar partridge to the people who likely wrote this song, but you're not going to find them in a pear tree or any tree for that matter. So then there's the snow partridge. Put this in here. It's actually not a candidate at all for the song, but it's a cool bird. Lives in open habitat, but it's a high elevation bird found in the Himalayas above 9,000 feet. So if the story originated in the Himalayas and spread to Europe, this would be a good candidate. It's possible. Problem is, this is a bird that lives above the tree line. So not only are there no pear trees, there's no trees at all, but it's a beautiful partridge. So definitely worth including in our tour of partridge species. This one also has a virtually no likelihood of being an originator of this or the bird of the song, but it's a Madagascar partridge, endemic to obviously Madagascar. So um, it's one of the least known partridges from around the world, including it here though, because it's the only species in its genus, which is often rare for any animal. And genetically, the evidence suggests that this is probably the oldest evolutionary partridge there is. So the the ancestral partridge is most closely related to this modern day Madagascar partridge. Very little known about it, extremely rare, also an undergrowth species, so probably not going to find them in pear trees. But in you know, of all the partridges, the most closely related to the dinosaurs as well. Another, I'm bringing in another Wisconsin bird here. It's the ruffed grouse. Technically not a partridge, since the partridges all originated in the old world and this is native to here. We call it a grouse. Again, the colloquialisms really kind of muddy the waters here. Um, Not a partridge, but in New England, particular, probably the first areas that the Europeans that came to the Americas, one of the first areas of again probably the descendants of the people who wrote the song. They called it a partridge. So if you look at old books, magazines, hunting books, regular non-hunting books, particularly in the colonial areas of the U.S., New England, they reference the ruffed grouse as a partridge, often spelled as you see here with an apostrophe, the partridge, but actually it's referring to the ruffed grouse as the partridge. So again, a lot of the Europeans that came here just took what they knew of the old world and gave those names, put those names on the animals that were here that already had names given to them by other humans. So this particular species wouldn't have been mentioned in a 1700s European folk tune, but for those humans that were here that had descended from them, this is a bird that would likely fit the bill of the partridge in a pear tree. And this one is often found in trees. So unlike the old world partridges, this particularly pine trees, like the gray partridge, this is a bird that is more often stumbled upon, scaring the bejesus out of you as they burst out of the snow or a pine tree when you're just a mere feet from them. It's a great experience if you haven't had that experience before of getting really scared by a bird. Uh, in this case, they're hunkered down often in the wintertime under the snow, under the deep snow. In fact, ruffed grouse are great at making the bird version of snow angels. They literally dive bomb head first into the snow, into deep snow, hopefully, uh, completely submerging themselves. And then when they do that, they kind of create a nice, cozy dome under the snow. The snow seals itself behind them, and then their body heat takes over. Birds, as a general rule, have much higher body temperature than humans, usually above 100 degrees, 103, 104 is normal. So then once they're in the snow, they've got that nice shelter, that body heat warms up that space. It's probably not going to get above freezing in there, but it's not going to go below 20. So somewhere in the 20 to 32 degree area. It's kind of like if you live in Iceland, that's kind of how it feels. It doesn't get super cold, but doesn't get super hot either. Enough to keep the bird alive. when the temperatures outside get really, really, really cold. So then when they decide to leave, usually in the morning when the sun comes out, usually when us birders are out wandering and don't hear them, and then they burst through the snow, and that's when they leave that nice little snow angel with their wings. The ruffed grouse also has very high tree potential. In fact, it roosts in trees. It's commonly seen in trees, unlike the old world partridges, and particularly fond of abandoned orchards, which would include, dare I say, pear trees. So this is a ruffed grouse in a chokecherry tree. A ruffed grouse in a chokecherry tree. Almost the same thing. So I would say from a tree perspective, this bird has a lot going for it. This is the long-tailed partridge, long-tailed wood partridge, also known as the long-tailed tree quail. Not a likely candidate, but also a cool species to feature. Uh, it's small for a partridge, which is why they're often called quail, but certainly looks like the other partridges, not very common, found in the forests of Mexico. So maybe via the Spaniards, uh, that there could be some relation to the song. Near trees, but prefer to stay on the ground in the undergrowth, and then sadly, they're in trouble due to deforestation. This is a bird you're probably familiar with if you're familiar with birds or even not. The northern bobwhite with their great little tune. It's a very solid candidate, and like the ruffed grouse, colloquially sometimes considered the quail. So could be. And then a final clue, particularly when you look at modern day representations of the partridge in a pear tree, you'll see a lot of birds. This could be the uh, influence from the Americas, is that the partridge is often depicted as having a top knot, which is that feather sticking out from the bird's head. You don't see that in the kind of ancient representations of the song. You do see it a lot in the modern day representations of the song. So around here, at least in North America, that would be the California quail. Very common, very important bird, well known. It's adaptable to humans for a lot of areas out west. It's become a backyard bird, very common. And and again, and when you see a lot of modern day, particularly New World representations of the song, it's the California quail that's depicted. Plus, they love to roost in trees. In fact, of all the birds, uh, they like to roost high in trees. So high gives them it's easier for them to communicate. High gives them a good view for protection, and so this would be a very strong candidate. So then, I this is not based on any evidence, but this is now my vote. This is who I think are the winners in which bird is the original bird. Um, I've got to say it's got to be the gray partridge. In Even though they would never be perching in a tree, the fact that this is the most common bird in the area where the song was written, it's probably put in a pear tree for symbolism, a little bit of artistic licensing, but there's no basis from an ecological standpoint that the gray partridge would ever be in a tree or a pear tree. But it's probably the bird that the the song is referencing, at least originally. If you look at ancient artwork, depictions of the song maybe a little bit later, I think the winner is the chikar partridge. It's that facial pattern you see often in ancient representations. I mean, you can't get super ancient for a song, well, a few hundred years, I suppose. Uh, that this is probably then what a lot of, after that original, once you started putting it into art, this is the probably the winner would be the chikar partridge. In the Americas, I think culturally, it probably became the ruffed grouse as, the colonials, the colonists probably would think of this as the partridge. They do love to go in trees. They would be in pear trees once the pear trees were planted. And then I think the modern day winner would be the California quail as the kind of the new blood for the representation. Again, none of this is based on evidence, but these are my votes. You can make your own if you care, you can make your own guesses. So that's the partridge. Again, this was told from a very specific type of holiday, a Christian holiday that originated in one part of the world. There's a lot of other relationships with these types of birds in other cultures around the world. But this particular bird, not native to Wisconsin or the Americas, so probably mostly not found in trees for most birds, but not impossible. And then when I thought of this as a topic, I thought I really don't know much about them, probably because they're not native to here. And this was strengthened a little bit when my daughter asked me what the topic was this week, and I said the partridge. She said, "Oh, you mean like the partridge in a pear tree?" I was like, "Yeah, that partridge." And then she paused and said, "What's a partridge?" A little while later, almost the exact same conversation with my son, but kind of reversed. He said, "You know, what are you doing this week?" I said, "A partridge." I said, "Oh, is that a bird?" I said, "Yeah." And then took him a while to think, "Oh, wait, the partridge in a pear tree." So based on media, this is what we learn, but I didn't know much about the bird in particular. But for the most part, it's your average galliform ground bird, likes to run, related to chickens, related to turkeys, related to pheasants, important to humans for meat and symbolism and religion, and it's something that, based on your demographic of where you grew up, you hear about a lot, and also a very cool bird. So that is the partridge. Thanks for joining me. I will stop sharing my screen. It's almost 10 o'clock.